strong site fidelity to the nesting beach. They tend to return to lay subsequent nests in the same beach or island. And this is data that we know and we typically get back from capture mark recapture and mark recapture programs. And this is something that we do know. In the keeping with the initial theme of this conference, knowledge gaps, or addressing knowledge gaps, just to highlight something that we do not know about flatbacks, and that's the distribution of these same internesting turtles when they're located offshore during their internesting period. So that's the period between subsequent nests. There is a general hypothesis by Whittock who suggested that flatbacks tend to remain close to their nesting beach, but this was based really on what was observed in other marine turtle species around the world. One published study by David Webb from the Lasseter Islands, who highlighted that flatback turtles migrated up to 50 kilometres away from their nesting beach towards the mainland coast before returning to the same beach. If we look at the literature for other marine turtle populations, we actually find that the variation, there is a variation in the distribution between the populations. So for example, with loggerhead populations, some populations remain close to the nesting beach, while other populations undertake long-distance migrations. The same applies for green populations. And this is just highlighting the papers that show this variation in movement. And again, this highlights the knowledge gap of flatback turtles. How does the offshore internesting distribution vary amongst flatback populations within the Northwest Shelf Management Genetic Unit? Just to highlight the nearshore or internesting distribution of flatbacks, or the breeding distribution of flatbacks, extends primarily from Exmouth in the west, over of the Northwest Shelf Management Unit, over to the Lasseter Islands in the Kimberley region. We've already seen, already heard that it's been identified in the Lasseter Islands in the Kimberley region, and also from Anne Miller's presentation earlier from Avonmouth Beach and Eco Beach. The focus of this presentation primarily on 4 sites within the Pilbara region, including Pendoley Island, Port Helen, Mundabul and Ghana, and Barrow Island, with internesting data already being available for long-term marine turtle management plan from Chevron, and also available for all. The Pilbara region is also currently host to a substantial resource sector, with coastal development infrastructure for mineral storage, processing and transport facilities present on or near to several of the flatback populations. And the following map shows the location of existing and planned infrastructure within the Pilbara. Interactions of internesting flatback turtles with activities associated to the resource sector, including dredging, seismic surveys, vessel movements, are potentially frequent. And the associated impact is largely unquantified, other than what's already presented in environmental impact assessments. Further data on flatback distribution patterns and areas of aggregation, which host a large congregation of internesting female turtles, is required to assess the significance of the interaction and ultimately providing effective protection in the mitigation plans and impact assessments that we provide for our clients. So the aim of this presentation is really to highlight the offshore internesting distribution of flatback turtles and to look at variations between populations when they're located offshore, and to identify potential interactions with industry activity. Moving on to the method, we deployed 57 satellite transmitters between 2005 and 2011 at 4 of the sites. We used different types of tags through the years as the technology developed, including Argos-based tags and GPS-based tags. We used 3 different manufacturers. And again, flatbacks using the harness technique for applying the technique. The Argos and GPS location data was filtered to improve the accuracy of the data set and remove biases inherent with satellite tracking data. Included a speed of travel filter, a location, a turning angle filter, and yeah, helped us to get the data. And then we separated the data according to their internesting periods. So we looked at all that data and positions located close to the beach. We tracked the turtles for a total of 112 internesting periods across these 4 sites. We also calculated the daily mean position for each turtle action. We looked at a number of interesting tracks located within 5 kilometres of a major resource development. The locations of these developments provided by the Western Australian Department of Mines and Petroleum. And this was generally the footprint that's often found on offshore major resource developments in terms of boundary. We also looked at the interesting time spent within offshore titles that were released for petroleum industry activities. And this isn't necessarily areas where there are currently undertaking work. It's areas that could perhaps in the future contain activities relating to the petroleum industry. So this is our location map, 4 tracks, or the 4 locations rather. These are our interesting tracks, and I'll go into detail at each site. And this is overlaid with the offshore tidal areas and the locations of the major resource developments. First of all, just look at Thevenard Island. Thevenard, we received 12 interesting tracks from our 6 turtles. This is just the patterns that we got. These are the, I don't know if you can see, this is but Thevenard was actually exposed to quite a lot of potential industry-related activities within the offshore titles areas, and a large number of the tracks passed close to some of the mainland coastal development sites, and also within a Wheatstone LNG shipping channel that is currently being developed. We then looked at individual patterns. For Thevenard, we identified 4 individual interesting patterns within the nearshore area, which is considered within 10 kilometres of the nesting site, which was taken again from other studies conducted elsewhere, published studies. We found 3 tracks remained nearshore. 1 had an interesting loop north. 5 went to the mainland before venturing west. And interestingly, all of these tracks migrated close to major resource developments and through the existing Pendoley proposed shipping channel. And some headed to the mainland and ventured east. At Barrow Island, 70 tracks were monitored with satellite transmitters. And again, a large proportion exposed to potential offshore titles areas, and also its location of the Gorgon LNG site, potentially affecting nearshore ground turtles. So tracks, 26 tracks remain nearshore over the period. We tracked 6 turtles that ventured east, greater than 10 kilometres, but not reaching the mainland. Some ventured in the southeast direction, and others headed to the mainland. That was 12 tracks all the way. Mundabulangana, if I say it correctly, this is a smaller site in terms of the sample size, and only use Argos-related tags. And I must point out that these tracks are actually all of the positions, not necessarily the positions taken as the daily mean position. So this is getting the most out of the tracks on the map. At Munda, there's no development sites, there's no offshore titles areas within the nearshore area. 2 of the tracks remain within 10k, and another departed in the west of the area. Finally, Port Hedland. 27 tracks. It's the location of an existing operational harbour, so proposed future development, potentially as an expansion. Again, 9 tracks remain nearshore. Some ventured east, some even further east, and some in a northwesterly direction. And these are 4 general patterns that we found at Port Hedland. I must also point out that the patterns are really just what we identified. Post-nesting tracks is a common type of track that you might get from a post-nesting that's well defined in the literature. Internesting tracks, there is no common typical movement pattern that you can distinguish for each track. So we found Thevenard turtles were found to travel